Thanks for having me on, and you're absolutely right. And the reason why you have it right, and it shows why it wasn't covered in the mainstream media. If these were just a bunch of commies out there who were demanding free education or free health care, it would have been wall-to-wall coverage. But these were average French citizens who were fighting a fuel tax that their president, Emmanuel Macron, was putting on the price of gas, all in the name of climate change. And he said France is going to lead the way in the climate change vision, and to do so, he was charging up to $7 a gallon for gas in France, and this tax was going to be used to fight climate change. And the average French citizen said, we can't afford that. And they took to the streets, and they absolutely rioted. And you're right, it is like the stamp tax. It's like the tea tax of the early revolution here in our country.
Tell me again, because I'm always focusing on 50 things at once, and I'm staring at your name, and I'm looking at your website, and I'm talking to you, and I can't listen to every word. How much was the tax? How bad was it? First of all, what do they pay in France? Do you know about, in American dollars, what they pay for a gallon of gas now, and what was he proposing it go to? Do you know?
It was going to go to roughly $7 a gallon. They pay a little more than we do right now because of, one, taxes, and also they have to import their gas, right? This is the blessing that we have in America, is that we are an oil-producing country. Actually, we're now the world's leading oil-producing country. So when you have to import your gas like they do in France, they were paying probably roughly around $4.50, $5 a gallon, which is still very high. But on top of that, an additional tax that would have raised it to $7 a gallon. And again, that revenue was going to be used to fight climate change. That's an artificial tax put on by the crazy believers of the climate change religion, and the people took to the streets to protest.
Wow. So, I mean, can you imagine going from $4 a gallon, $4 and change, to $7 and change? Nobody could earn a living anymore. All the trucking companies be put out of business. All the people would have to, and that was what Macron said when they asked him. It reminded me of, wasn't it Marie Antoinette that said, "Let them eat cake"? Right? That was who said that, right?
She was rumored to have said that, but you remember our own former President Obama, when he was running in 2008, said that his vision of America's energy policy was going to necessarily drive up the cost of gas, and he said that proudly. Remember, right. They tried to push a cap-and-trade bill very early on in his administration. Luckily, it failed. But these are the beliefs that people like Michael Bloomberg and Tom Steyer and a lot of the Hollywood elites, the people who fight for this climate change narrative, Bernie Sanders, and now the newest freshman Congresswoman, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, these are the policies that they want implemented in our own country. And thank goodness we have a president, at least, who is going to push back against them.
Yeah, but I seem to remember, in that vein of "Let them eat cake" by Marie Antoinette, or whoever was rumored to have said it, they were protesting, and Macron's statement was, "What's the big deal? Tell them to get on a train or a bus or start carpooling." And, again, that reminds me of why I love America, because, in America, you're allowed to be an individual. You're allowed to have individuality. To me, all of that goes away when you're riding on a subway and you're herded like cattle on a cattle train. When you're at a bus, all your individuality and all of your proudness in life, your ego is just smacked down. You're just a loser on a bus or a train, herded like cattle. I don't want to be in a carpool. I want to be in my own car, putting my own music on. I don't want to worry about you or any other person. You're probably a really nice guy, Daniel. I don't want to carpool with you every morning. I want to carpool with anybody. And so in France, he's just saying, let him eat cake. Screw you. In the name of climate change, you got to give up your car. You're not going to drive ever again. And he blinked, right? They won. Am I wrong? Did they not win?
No, you're absolutely right. He blinked, and he said that they were not going to push it forward. People literally died. 4 people died during these protests. I mean, these were protests the likes of which, you know what they would have been similar to? The protests we saw in Baltimore, the protests that we saw in Missouri a couple of years ago. But this was worldwide. This was going on. And so if that had happened here in the States, it would be wall-to-wall coverage. But like I said earlier, since it was about something that was sympathetic to the media and a belief that they care deeply about, climate change, they just brushed it under the table. They gave it absolutely no coverage. And that's why they won. People in America know that it even happened.
Well, I was going to say, Daniel, they won, the protesters, and he killed this new tax. But didn't he then, in the typical Marxist fashion, these guys are all such Marxist losers who try and portray themselves as moderates like Obama, didn't he then put in new taxages for rich people? I believe that's what happened. So, I mean, they won, the average middle class person won, but now he's saying I'm going to replace it with a wealth tax. So, obviously France didn't win because if you tax rich people, they run away. They go to another country,
Exactly. And here in the States, at least, we have the luxury of exodus from your state if it is a high-tax state. Where I was born and raised, which is New York City, is, I think, the second largest exodus state, only to California. People are fleeing these states because they cannot afford the tax burden that's put on them. What do you do if you're a Frenchman? And there's no doubt a Frenchman loves his country the way I love America. Where do you go when your government punishes you and persecutes you in the name of some false ideology or some false religion?
I know where I go.
Much hope, and I think that's why these protests were as aggressive and as violent as they were. People are trying to fight back for their country.
I know where I'd go. Monte Carlo, baby. I'd go straight to Monte Carlo. No, but where does a middle class or working class guy go? Nowhere. There's nowhere to go. That's the reality. And that's why
one
liberals...
of the champions of climate change here in the States is Bernie Sanders, and it was just released today that this month he spent about $300,000 in private jets traveling the nation for whatever purposes. Here's
just
the
like
guy
Al Gore.
who literally his entire campaign is founded on the need for climate change revolution. He yells at all of us about our carbon footprint. He demands all this crazy government action. But in his personal life, he owns multiple homes, and he spent $300,000. Remember, the average American salary is $48,000. He spent $300,000 on private jets just this month. That is exactly the type of Marie Antoinette personality that Emmanuel Macron is, and that all of these crazies on the left who believe in climate change. That is the way they live their life, but they want the rest of us to sacrifice and suffer.
And by the way, he's not unusual. In other words, Obama's the same way. He's headed for being a billionaire, Obama. You know he flies on nothing but private jets while he's criticizing the average American driving an extra 8 miles in a small car. The same thing with Hillary Clinton. Same thing with Al Gore, the big believer in climate change. Al Gore has a giant mansion that's like 25,000 square feet and flies nothing but private jets. And it's interesting to point out in Hollywood, same thing with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yes.
He's a guy that talks all day long about climate change, but he flies all around the world in a private jet to screw models. These guys are all living in a dream world, man. Hey, hang with me, Daniel. I hear music, which means we're headed to a break. When we get back, more with Daniel Turner, president of the Future and Energy Group that advocates for U.S. energy workers. I want to kind of explore something with you about a pet peeve of mine, which is what people's electric bills would look like if we did nothing but green energy. What would the average electric bill, instead of $200 a month for your small apartment, would it be like $1,200? When we come back, we'll get the answer from Daniel Turner. So we've got Daniel Turner with us for a second segment. Hey, Daniel.
Hello again.
President of Power the Future, website's powerthefuture.com. One of my pet peeves, I talk about it all the time, is, look, I'm not going to debate whether there's climate change or not, or global warming or not, although I think one could argue now that stats have been manipulated and there's probably global cooling going on right now. Not warming, but liberals would say, see, well, that's still climate change. Maybe there's climate change, maybe there isn't. If there is, it's okay, because climate changes. And we've had warmer and hotter periods and decades, and that's life. There's no reason to change your entire economy over climate change. And if you do, what happens? So I want you to explain to people, because you are the energy expert, not me. If you get rid of coal and you get rid of fracking and you get rid of fossil fuel and you get rid of oil and you don't drill anymore because it's environmentally no good, it's not PC. The next thing you know, everything is on green energy and everything's on solar and everything's on wind. You take a $200 electric bill, what would it go to for your apartment?
Exactly. The average American utility bill right now is about $110 a month, and that is by far among the lowest of the developed world. You compare that to Germany, where they would pay close to $500 a month, and the reason why is because of their green mandates. You look at a country like in Scandinavia that has enormous oil reserves, but they have such crazy environmental laws that they spend roughly 31 cents a kilowatt hour. In America, we spend 12 cents for a kilowatt hour. So again, I have no problem with renewable energies where it makes sense. I think it should be used. I named my organization Power the Future for that purpose. But we need to have an adult conversation about how we use our energy and where it comes from. And when you have people, like I mentioned earlier, Bernie Sanders, and now the new child of the left, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and And I call her a child because she has an immature understanding of energy policy. When she makes outlandish statements like we are going to be fossil fuel free by 2035, she does not deserve a seat at the adult table, because that is just an immature statement.
Can you have a pen handy? I want you to take down my email. Can you do that, Daniel?
Of course.
It's wayneroot@gmail.com. wayneroot@gmail.com. Now, I write for the 16th biggest newspaper in the country, the Las Vegas Review-Journal, and my columns are syndicated all over the United States now by Creator Syndicate. I want to write a column about the reality of green energy. You know, we could all have a debate about climate change. That's great. A debate about global warming. Great. But forget all that. Are you willing to pay $900 a month instead of $300, or $1,200 a month instead of $300, or as you said in Germany, 5 times higher? It's 100 or so in America, 500 in Germany. So, in other words, a guy like me. Let's use me as an example. I'm a very lucky guy. I've been very successful in life. I work 16 hours a day. I think I'm a talented guy. I'm very good on TV and radio. I make enough money to live in a very beautiful big house in Las Vegas on a golf course. Do you know what my electric bill is? In the summer, I'm not going to say the whole year, but in the summer,
pretty expensive in the summer.
$1,900 a month in the summer.
Yeah.
So if I lived in Germany, you're telling me it would be $2,000 a month times 5, $10,000 a month, which is more than my mortgage.
If you put these mandates on it, which is exactly why these riots in Paris were so violent, because that's what this policy does.
So can you email me all those stats you just mentioned on the show about Germany and about Denmark, I think it was, or whatever that Scandinavian country was?
Yeah.
And I want to put that test to the American people. How many of them are willing to pay twice as much, 3 times more, 4 times more, 5 times more in the name of global ecology and environmentalism? I'd love to do that. Daniel Turner, president of Power of the Future, powerthefuture.com. Thank you, Daniel.
Wayne, thanks for having me on.